The Associated Press reports at this hour that Justin Trudeau is also in Kiev, Ukraine at this hour, meeting with Ukrainian officials. We'll have more on that as details become available. There are fears about what Putin's next move could be ahead of tomorrow, including a formal declaration of war, which could see more Russian soldiers head to Ukraine. Sergiy Kyslytsya is Ukraine's ambassador to the United Nations. In his first Canadian interview, I spoke to him about those concerns and whether the UN can be part of the solution to ending the war. Ambassador Kyslytsya, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I know on Monday it is Victory Day in Russia, and I wonder how concerned you are that that could lead to a full declaration of war by Russia or an escalation of the invasion.
If Putin decides to declare a war on the 9th of May, it would all be shenanigans, because from the point of view of international law, he is already in the state of war. And as you know, the General Assembly on the 2nd of March, by a vote of 141 countries, named Russia an aggressor state. So it may have an impact primarily on the legal situation in Russia itself, and it would trigger and give him internal legal grounds to mobilize additional military resources and personnel. But from the point of view of international law, Russia is in the state of war with Ukraine since 2014.
Right. I mean, he may well use Monday as, I guess, a bit of a propaganda tool inside his own country, but could he also decide that this is a moment to send a further message to Ukraine and to the world by escalating the situation in particular regions in the east, for instance?
Well, I'm sure that the Russians are desperate in trying to escalate the military situation as much as they can. I mean, militarily, they showed to the world that they are impotent. Unfortunately, it happens again the backdrop of us losing people, both military and civilians. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you from the very outset, I mean, the military defeat of Russia is not the end of the story, and it's not the end of the war, unfortunately.
What do you mean by that, Ambassador?
Because the military defeat, believe it or not, with the help of our allies and partners, is more realistic than changing the whole pattern of Russian behavior at the international arena. Right. And as long as Putin's regime is still in place, we will all of us, the Europeans, the Canadians, Americans, Africans, Latin Americans, we will all continue to live under constant threat of repetition of the assault from Russia.
Russia was, of course, suspended from the UN Human Rights Council last month. It is and remains, though, a permanent member, and certainly you hear every day from that the Security Council and the broader council is meeting. You hear from the Russian delegation. The UN Secretary General went to Moscow and Kiev just last week. I wonder whether you think the UN, even though you are there, can still play a role in this, or whether, given that Russia remains at the table of the UN and has that kind of power, whether the UN has any real power here.
The only reason Russia is still there and not kicked out of the Security Council, not removed from the Security Council, is that Russia possesses nuclear arsenals. And everyone, be it Canada, be it Europe, be it the United States, people are very much worried what's going to happen to nuclear arsenal in case wars come to worse, you know. So that is why people continue to sit down with Nebenzia, the Russian ambassador in the Security Council, and have business with him. The United Nations was conceived by three leaders, by Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin in the middle of the last century. No surprise, it's not perfect. How could something conceived by Stalin be perfect in the first place? But the United Nations is not just the Security Council. The Security Council is only one pillar of the United Nations, although it's one of the most prominent and the most visible, because there is a lot of action there in the Security Council. However, there is also another pillar, that is the General Assembly, that is a global parliament, so to say, where every country has one vote. And I must say, to the credit of the General Assembly, that General Assembly, when it comes to the aggression of the Russian Federation, acts in a very decisive manner. We have approved at least 3 resolutions on aggression, humanitarian resolution, and as you rightly said, Russian Federation was stripped of the membership powers in the Human Rights Council, after which it decided to leave the council altogether. So another pillar of the United Nations is the whole family of UN agencies that are very, very much instrumental in providing humanitarian assistance to Ukraine and its people now in the circumstances of the Russian full-scale invasion.
And we've certainly seen that in the case of Mariupol, for instance, where there has been some success in recent days. We've seen other countries reopen embassies in Kiev, and world leaders travel to Kiev as a sign of solidarity. Canada has yet to do that. I wonder what your message would be to the Canadian government around the importance of those, either the visits or the reopening of the embassy.
I don't want to sound impolite, especially because I sincerely believe that Canada is one of the closest friends of Ukraine, and Canada has proven it by deeds, not only by words. So the fact that Canadian embassy is not reopened in Kiev is up to the Canadian security to decide.
And on the point of whether the Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister should visit Ukraine and Kiev, Ambassador, what is your view on that?
I think that if the visit happens, it will be only the right thing to do, because given the long history of Canadian-Ukrainian relationship, even before the renewal of the independence, we will be very happy to welcome the Prime Minister of Canada, because all Ukrainians, practically every single family in Ukraine, sees Canada as one of the most closest allies of Ukraine. So. But frankly, we don't have a deficit of visitors in Ukraine. Every second day we have a prime minister or president of some countries. So I think that the Canadian prime minister will still have the brightest spot on the agenda of Ukrainian international politics or even the Ukrainian internal politics.
What does your country need at this stage of the conflict, Ambassador? One that perhaps has gone on longer than many people imagined. What is the central thing that you need?
We need the weapons and arms and munition up to the requirements of the current warfare. And I think that we are doing reasonably well, but not as fast as we would require to have these accumulated strengths at the front, so we can not only stop the advance of the Russian forces, but also to regain the territory and to deoccupy Ukrainian villages and towns. Because as you have seen in Bucha, in Irpin, and in other places of Ukraine, the longer our citizens stay under the occupation, the greater the tragedy is, and the greater the toll among the civilians is.
Ambassador, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining Canada today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.